Chapter 7. Edge of Destruction. The plane landed in Newark Airport at 6 a.m. on a rainy April morning. I walked out the terminal with nothing but the clothes on my back and a $10 bill in my pocket. Outside, I caught a bus to Journal Square in Jersey City and called an old girlfriend, Karen. I told her my situation, and she arranged for me to move in with her in the basement apartment of a home owned by her sister, Barbara, and her husband, Dan. Her parents lived in the upstairs apartment. Tony, her father, picked me up in an old Ford Falcon. We had never met before, so it was an uncomfortable ride, especially since I looked like death warmed over, skinny and dirty with bloodshot eyes. We had light conversation to pass the time during the 2-mile drive, and I shifted uneasily in the seat as I knew he was studying me. When we arrived, everyone in the house was still sleeping. Tony showed me to the basement apartment and walked away. I opened the door to a large, well-kept studio and saw Karen wrapped beneath a blanket. She opened her eyes and smiled when she saw me. I removed my sneakers and fell asleep beside her. The next few days were busy for me. I called Greg to let him know I was home, and he invited me over to his antique shop. We sat around with 2 other guys playing guitars, drinking, and doing cocaine. Aware that I needed money to support myself, get butch, and pay back my stepdad, he offered me a part-time job working in his shop. Before long, I had grown impatient because I wasn't able to save much working part-time. I then took a job repairing trucks in an auto body company. 3 weeks later, I was in a position to pay my debt and send for my dog. When I called Tommy, however, I was devastated when he told me that Butch had been sold. Determined to move forward, I buried myself in my work. I spent long hours at the body shop with people I grew up with, enjoying what I was doing. At the end of the day, the guys would sit around drinking beer and getting high. Later, I'd go home, change, and hang out with Greg. Although I had a busy social life, I made sure I spent time at home and contributed my share to the household. I brought groceries, painted, and helped Dan make repairs. He was in a heavy metal rock band, so we had much in common, including alcohol and cocaine. 90% of the time when I came home, I found Karen, who also had a drinking problem, either passed out or in a violent mood. She was not someone I had hopes of being with long term, but merely a means to an end, till I can get back on my feet and return to California. I was just happy to have a roof over my head, warm meals to eat, and a bed to sleep in. My longing for California was darkened by the awareness that, in all likelihood, there was a warrant for my arrest. Sooner or later, I was going to jail, and being high most of the time didn't help matters at all. I was paranoid day and night, constantly looking over my shoulder, fearing at any moment the cops were going to stop me, run a check, and extradite me back. After months of living in this stressful state, I concluded that it would be probably better to just go to San Diego and turn myself in. But in order for that to happen, I would need to continue working a while longer to earn money to pay for the trip. One Saturday night, after working with Dan on his Volkswagen van and getting high throughout the day, I went to spend time with Karen, only to find her out cold. I left out the rear basement door into the pitch-dark night and stepped over a wall that formed a barrier to a 32-foot cliff. Between the wall and the cliff's edge was a narrow footpath, which I intended to use to cross over into another yard and then into the street. After 4 steps, the ground was no longer there, and I felt a 32-foot drop, landing headfirst onto the concrete floor of an abandoned, trash-filled garage. I don't know how long I was there before I regained consciousness. I just remember holding my head, wondering why it was so wet. I was petrified when I realized it was blood and frantically tried to catch it as it gushed out. My sandals had been thrown off during the fall, and after assessing my situation, I began the long, barefoot walk back to the house. I rang the doorbell and Karen answered. She gasped and, still half drunk, made her way upstairs to get her sister. I followed her to the apartment and plopped into a chair in the kitchen where she, Dan, and Barbara tended to my head wound. As they scurried around, I noticed a huge gash in my forearm. The skin was torn back and I could see straight to the bone. I questioned their immediate concern for my head instead of my arm. but the stunned look on their faces held the answer. My head was in worse condition than I had realized. They quickly came to the conclusion that the injury was beyond their control and drove me to the hospital. While the emergency room attendants cleaned and stitched my arm, I pleaded for them to give me something for the pain. It felt like my head had been driven into my shoulders. They gave me some medication, then, unable to get a surgeon, closed the wound on my head as well, until someone was available to treat me in the morning. After a long, restless night, I woke to sunlight streaming across the foot of my bed from a partially blocked window. Scanning the room and seeing the strange machines and supports around my body, the events of the previous night flooded my mind. My neurologist walked in and apologized for not being able to get to me sooner due to an out-of-state emergency brain operation. He stayed with me throughout a series of x-rays, a CAT scan, and an MRI. After going over the results, he gently placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Mr. Valentine, don't move." He proceeded to tell me there was damage done to 5 vertebrae. 2 of these, which were in the neck, were cracked and with the slightest move could paralyze me for the rest of my life. He quickly ordered a device called a halo, which was attached to my head to keep it from turning. It was constructed of 4 metal rods, one on each side of my body, secured to a chest harness. At the upper part of these rods was a metal ring that circled my head and was anchored into my skull with screws. I hated it. It was so uncomfortable with the screws constantly digging into my head that I threatened to wreck everyone and everything in sight if they didn't remove it. They replaced it with a more comfortable device called a soma brace. My doctor told me to plan on being in the hospital for at least 3 months. I asked him about work, and he cautioned me not to even think about it for a minimum of 9 months. The bones needed time to mend, so I settled into a normal rest routine that was facilitated by heavy-duty painkillers, sleeping pills, and my own personal prescription of cocaine that I had delivered to my room by a dealer. One morning, I placed a call to the storage facility in California and explained my situation. They told me not to worry about being behind in my payments. I could make them up when my health was restored. This was a great relief because I wanted nothing more than to return to the West Coast and put my life back together. In 2 weeks, I signed myself out of the hospital. I rested for 3 weeks at the apartment with Karen, then eager to get things rolling, went back to prepping trucks at the auto body shop, soma brace and all. The relationship with Karen soon grew sour, and I moved into the shop, bedding down at night in the sleeper of a tractor. In time, I had enough cash to rent a room in the home of my friend Jake. This was a welcome change and one that had many fringe benefits, as it was a 24-hour drug environment that afforded me many opportunities to feed my habit. There were many diversions, but the quest for California never strayed from before my eyes.